All right, hello. So this morning, we did have an asynchronous day, but I did ask some of you to join me for a small group. So for those of you who did not join today, I'm just going to go over what we did. So basically, I just wanted to check in with you guys and see how you were doing on the independent practice from Friday because I noticed some of you either did half the work or didn't do any work. So I just want to check in and make sure that you're understanding it and I can help you get started. So we are still working on two-step equations. So on the side, I wrote that step one, we have to undo subtraction or addition. And then step two is undo multiplication or division. So let me try to move this so you can see more. And then on the side again, I also wrote the inverse operations. So those operations that are going to undo each other. So, or addition is going to undo subtraction is going to undo addition, and then multiplication is going to undo division, and then division going to undo multiplication. So these are the key pieces of information that you're going to need to know as we go about solving two-step equations. So I circled 1 and 2 because these are ones I want to focus on today. So for number 1, we have negative 5x plus 1 equals negative 19. So according to our steps, our step 1 is wanting to undo addition or subtraction. So here I noticed there's an addition sign. And then when the negative 5 and the x are together like that, that means they're multiplying together. So we're going to hold off on undoing this multiplication, and we're going to start with undoing this addition first. So in order to undo addition, we want to subtract. So we're going to subtract 1 from both sides, and remember, whatever we do to one side, we have to do to the other because the equal sign is like a balance. So 1 minus 1 is 0, so that just cancels out. And negative 19 minus 1. So this is where those integer rules come in that we practiced last week. So we have a negative number and we're subtracting a positive number. So whenever we have a negative and a subtraction combined in an equation, remember we want to do that thing that we keep the first sign of the first number, we change the operation, and we change the sign. So now this equation is negative 19 plus negative 1. So if we're adding a negative to a negative, we're going to keep going into the negatives. So now we have negative 20. Oops. All right, so then whatever we didn't use on the left-hand side, we're just going to bring right down. So negative 5x. All right, now step 2 says to undo multiplication or division. So now in this case, we are multiplying negative 5 and x together. So in order to get that x by itself, we have to undo multiplication with division, the inverse operation. So I'm going to divide both sides by negative 5 to get that x by itself. And negative 5 divided by negative 5 is 1, or 1x, so that cancels out. And we're left with x equals negative 20 divided by negative 5. And once again, those are those integer rules. So negative 20 divided by negative 5 would be positive 4. Because if we multiplied 4, a positive, and negative 5, a negative together, we would always get a negative answer. All right, so number 1 is x equals 4. All right, so I'm going to try 1 or 2 more and see if you get the hang of it after watching this video. Okay, so now number 2, we have an x over 4 minus 5 equals negative 3. So in this case, we have a fraction, and this is something you have to remember for the rest of your life as well, that whenever you see a fraction is the same thing as dividing. Because let's say I have a whole pie that I made, and I only want to eat half of it. If I have 1/2 of the pie, I'm dividing it into 2. I'm dividing it in half. So whenever you see a fraction, you know that the operation is division. So we're going to hold off on that for now because our first step is to undo addition or subtraction. So here we have a minus 5. So we're going to add 5 to undo that. Add 5. And negative 5 plus 5, or minus 5 plus 5 equals 0, so that cancels out. And then negative 3 plus 5, that's like subtracting 3 from 5, so we are left with 2 on this side. And then we just bring down whatever we didn't use, and we did not use the x over 4 yet. All right, now we have x over 4 equals 2. So our next step is to undo multiplication or division. So in this case, we're dividing. So in order to undo division, we want to multiply. So we're going to multiply both sides by 4. Multiply both sides by 4. And you're left with x equals 2 times 4, which is 8. So as you are going through all of these equations, please just remember step 1 and step 2. We call it a two-step equation because it requires 2 steps in order to get to that variable, or that letter by itself. So these are 2 basic two-step equations. And then on page 2, you had a little more complex ones, and we would call number 4 a multi-step equation because now we're distributing. And then question 5 and 6 and 7 and 8 are also multi-step because we're distributing or combining like terms. So we are going to try, number 5 first, and then we'll probably try number 7 as well. So number 5, it has x plus 4x plus 1 equals 26. So in this case, we have an x in one spot, an x in another spot, and then just a number. So just like if we had, let's say, 1 plus 4x plus 1 equals 26, we have these things called like terms. And like terms can be numbers, or like terms can be x's or variables. So in this case, our like terms are the x's. So we want to combine this x and 4x together to kind of condense the equation and make it easier to solve. So here we have x plus 4x, so that's 1x plus 4x equals 5x. And then we're left with plus 1, because we didn't use that yet, and then equals 26. Now, this equation is set up just like this first page, all these equations, how they look. So now, remember, step 1 is to undo addition or subtraction. So here we have addition, adding 1. So we're going to undo that by subtracting 1 from both sides. Oops. So 1 minus 1 is 0, and that cancels out. And then 26 minus 1 is 25. Now we just bring down whatever we did not touch yet, or did not work with yet, and that is our 5x. So now we have 5x equals 25. In step 2, we have to undo multiplication or division. So in this case, since 5 and x are being multiplied together, we are going to undo that using division. So I'm going to divide both sides by 5. And what I get is 5 divided by 5 cancels out to 1, or 1x. And that equals 25 divided by 5, which is 5. And that's how we go about this one. So 5 and 6 are basically identical in the way that you go about solving them. Just like here, we have an x. Oops. We have an x in this location, and then we also have a 2x in this location of the equation. So we want to combine them together, add like terms, and then you just go ahead and solve like you normally would. All right, so lastly, number 7 was another multi-step one. So number 7 is a distributing equation. So we have an 8, and then we have 4 plus x on the inside of parentheses. So whenever you see this, you know that we are distributing. We are using that distributive property. So we start first, before we do any of the two-step equation work, we want to distribute that 8 to the 4. So 8 times 4 is 32. And then positive 8 times positive x is just plus 8x. And that is just equal to 6. All right, now we go ahead and solve just like we normally would. So we have to undo addition or subtraction first. So in this case, this is a plus 8x, but 8 and x are being multiplied together, so we're going to hold off on that for now. And we're going to subtract this 32 because it's a positive 32, so we're going to subtract it. And I know that because our whole goal in canceling out is just for things to equal 0 or equal 1. So in this case, 32 minus 32, a positive 32 minus 32, I know is going to be 0. So I know I have to subtract there. I'm going to do 32 minus 32 on both sides. That cancels out. We're left with positive 8x equals negative 26. And then just by looking at this equation, I know it's not going to be a very even answer. So I would let you guys use your calculator for this one. So now we are dividing both sides by 8 because we want to undo this multiplication right here to get x by itself. So we're going to divide 8x divided by 8 and negative 26 divided by 8. And we are left with x equals negative 3.25. Negative 3.25. All right, it's tricky to draw this dot. There we go. So negative 3.25 as our answer. So once again, question 8 is going to be the same as question 7. We're distributing on this page. So you would distribute that 15 to the x, that 15 to the 3. Remember, using the distributive property, we want to use or distribute to every single value inside of the parentheses. You can't leave any of them out. So if we go back just to recap, page 1 was basic two-step equations. So all you have to do is follow step 1 and step 2, and you can go right into solving those two-step equations. Questions 3 and 4 are a little more complicated, but they still are in the general idea of those basic two-step equations. And then when we get to question 5 and 6, we are adding like terms first, and then we're getting into that two-step process. So undoing adding or subtracting, and then undoing addition, multiplication or division. And then lastly, 7 and 8, we are doing another multi-step question, but instead of combining like terms, we are distributing this time.